whether they are torching grassland or burning right outside your front door.
The Panhandles are no stranger to fires spreading thousands of acres and the devastation they can leave behind.
Today, we'll give you an inside look on the threats wildfires pose and how scientists, firefighters, and the Storm Surge 7 weather team work in tandem to keep you and your family safe.
Welcome to Firestorm 2022. Welcome to Firestorm 2022, brought to you by Matt Moles Allstate. Come along with us as we take a look behind the scenes of a fire season and discuss how we can all stay safe.
Here in the Panhandle, that's an even bigger issue. Fire weather can happen almost anywhere, but certain factors make us even more susceptible to wildfires.
So why is that? It all starts high above in Earth's atmosphere.
We get these very strong low pressure systems, very windy days and very dry days all at the same time.
Acting meteorologist in charge Mike Gittinger says these weather conditions make the Panhandles prone to wildfires. But one thing that makes our fire weather unique is how frequently we see these conditions because of our geographic location near the Rocky Mountains.
Jet streams interact with mountain ranges, and so we get these low pressure systems time and time again where they develop near our area and create these windy days. And of course, the desert Southwest and that dry air gets pulled across our area.
Not only do these conditions aid in our fire weather, but Wildland Urban Interface Coordinator Juan Rodriguez says our unique landscape plays a role.
A lot of people think that it's really flat up here, but then once you get into then you'll start finding a lot of topography within the canyons and drainages. And when fire gets into those, then it becomes really difficult to fight and suppress it.
Teddy Heckman, resource specialist at the Texas A&M Forest Service, says one base principle that is taught in the Heavy Equipment Academy to fight fires is an anchor, flank, and pinch tactic.
It's where you start at the hill or more the colder end of the fire. You get anchored in off that, and then you start flanking the fire, either working one flank or both flanks at the same time, and you kind of work your way to that head to eventually stop the spread.
A tool that is also used to help prevent or stop fires are prescribed burns. They are used in connection with multiple agencies to minimize sections of land with high fuel thresholds.
So we'll go ahead and have pre-established containment lines put in, and we'll have certain weather perimeters as well. And that will kind of allow us to keep that fire intensity on the lower end and easily manage it through there to kind of work through the topography in the land.
Heckman says using this tactic to manage land with high fuel loads is beneficial. It allows the firefighters as well as communities to stay safe when a fire weather event returns to the high plains. When that happens, the losses can be catastrophic for some. Back in December, we, along with the National Weather Service, forecasted a high fire threat for the high plains. Around 1 in the afternoon, that threat became real just north of Panhandle, and all of Carson County felt the effects.
The rate of spread that we saw was pretty incredible. The fire behavior was incredible. You know, we had spotting before the head fire. It was throwing erratic fire whirls. It was booking it.
This wildfire, known as the North 207 fire that started on the 4-6's ranch, had its eyes set on the town of Skellytown.
It was very worrisome. We always talk historically anything that happens on the 6s when there's a major wind event out of the southwest. That it's coming to Skellytown in a matter of where or which canyon it comes out of. You know, that's the point in question.
Within the first 30 minutes of the fire, the Skellytown Volunteer Fire Department was called to assist. Jacob Clifton, the fire chief, says the calls come very quickly for mutual aid on these high fire days.
As soon as we topped the hill, all we saw was fire. Skellytown's known to burn. Historically, so many wildfires have came through this area.
He says the fire took off running quicker than anticipated. At one point, it had shut off resources on the east side once reaching Highway 152. Additional aid was sent to help battle the side of the fire where the only option was to perform a burnout, which can be very risky on windy days.
They did a phenomenal job. One of the best burnout ops I've seen in my time in doing this, and it worked phenomenal. Hats off to the Park Service folks.
Around 3 p.m., just a couple of hours after the fire started, the decision came to evacuate the residents of Skellytown. Departments from Carson, Hutchinson, Roberts, Gray, and Wheeler counties, plus many more agencies were able to stop the spread just outside city limits. Clifton says he's thankful for everyone who assisted in battling this fire.
You know, I love the pride that this organization has, that we have people that care for the community enough to do that and take that that sacrifice. You know, and I don't ask that. You know, none of my command staff asks that. You know, it's what happens, and that's what I love about it.
This fire was a good reminder of Texas Panhandle wildfires. He also says it's been a while since they have seen a big fire in their area, but not to put your guard down, especially with how this fire season is shaping up.
Get ready, because it's going to happen again. It definitely makes me feel better about some of the buffer we have with that burn scar, being there for what we're fixing to get into, but there's still a lot of unburned country.
The North 207 fire burned just under 24,000 acres and one home was lost during this event. And that was outside of Skellytown city limits. Thankfully, there were no reports of any injuries.
And people are not the only ones who feel the impacts of fire season here on the High Plains. The Panhandle is home to thousands of species of plants and animals, which makes it a very diverse ecosystem. In Parks and Wildlife, Russell Martin says that fires play a key part in shaping that ecology.
Most of our wildlife and plant species are very well adapted to fires. There's a few that are susceptible to it, but it's all part of the larger ecosystem that historically functioned in a very heavy fire regime.
After a field has been burned up, the ground may seem desolate and bare, but there are other things in play that can bring life back to these areas. Associate Professor at West Texas A&M and AgriLife Range Specialist Tim Steffens says a fire can act as a catalyst when changing the form of nutrients.
We don't create more nutrients. We can sometimes change their form. We'll get more soil warming, and that will cause breakdown of organic material, and that will release some nutrients that are already in the system.
Fire can certainly hurt the plants that they consume. The flames will take off the leaves and tops of vegetation, but it's very rare for a fast-moving fire to be the cause of death for a plant.
So for instance, you get a fire that takes the cuticle off of prickly pear, and then you have an extended dry period afterwards, that prickly pear is liable to die.
It could take up to several years for a landscape to fully recover after wildfire has moved through. But if we get consistent spring and summer storms, that landscape could look untouched in as little as just 6 months. Most animals can escape an approaching fire front, but the size of that fire and the speed of the animal will determine how significant a fire's impact is.
But the more stationary critters, like we'll say a box turtle, for example, they have really limited options. So if their entire home range is burned up, then they're going to be really impacted by a wildfire until that area recovers.
The other big thing that will cause damage is just smoke inhalation. After those fires in 2017, we were out looking at some of the aftermath, and there were antelope that were alive, but they wouldn't run away because it had just cooked their lungs. And
Steffens would go on to add that 4 people lost their lives during the Southern Plains wildfire outbreak in 2017, and several thousands of cattle lost their lives as well. While fires can be a destructive force, they can have benefits.
With proper precautions, fire can exist on this landscape with humans, and can actually be beneficial to humans and to wildlife and to livestock production. It can also be very dangerous, and so we do have to have precautions in place and resources available to help prevent or stop wildfires from going through and being extremely destructive. But prescribed fire can actually be a really helpful tool for doing that and for helping improve wildlife habitat.
Even though fires can be a destructive force here, wildlife somehow finds a way to make a comeback. But how can we as humans learn to protect our lives and homes? Coming up, Brenda will give us some practical tips on staying safe. Stay with us here, Firestorm 22. The High Plains is known for many things. Its rugged terrain with snowstorms in the winter to lush green horizons in summer, thanks to the rainy season. But during the months of February and March, as we exit winter and enter spring, High Plains meteorologists call this time frame wildfire season. Up next, we cover the logistics and the coordination needed between different agencies that protect us from wildfires. We start with acting meteorologist in charge of the National Weather Service here in Amarillo, Texas, Michael Gittinger.
We work with the Texas Forest Service and local emergency management to get that word out, and of course the media is a huge outlet.
When spring arrives, grasses that have grown from last summer have been cured for several months after going dormant through the winter. High winds in the spring can set a fire racing out of control through open fields. That is when local fire officials need all the help they can get.
We try and tell our local cooperators and our fire departments to call us whenever they want us out there, whether it could be a small fire or a large one that's uncontained.
Texas A&M Forest Service uses part of Randall County Fire Station 1 to house local resources. But even on high fire threat days, sometimes local resources aren't enough to contain a large grass fire.
So we could bring in single-engine aircraft tankers or larger aircraft tankers that can be stationed.
If we have to get motor graders out there or other heavy equipment to help prevent fires from jumping across the road, that's where we get involved sometimes.
In order to pull resources from other agencies or across hundreds of miles, a good lead time on a high fire threat day is needed. According to Public Information Officer Sonia Gross, that communication is done quite well here in the Panhandles.
In anything, communication can always be improved, but we're very fortunate here in the Texas Panhandle where everybody knows everybody, and we've got a great working relationship with all of our emergency responders, our first responders, our county judges. Everybody is working together to make sure we do what we can to keep the public safe.
All offices work in tandem to communicate to other officials and the community how to prevent these fires from spreading and becoming out of control, like the wildfire outbreak back in 2017.
So we're in pretty much constant communication with the National Weather Service and along with our other local partners here. We're always talking back and forth about what the forecast is going to be and what resources we'll be bringing in.
With the help of all groups like the National Weather Service, the Department of Transportation, Texas A&M Forest Service, emergency management personnel, and fire departments from near or far, this collective effort is what it takes to save property and lives across the High Plains. So what can you do to help prevent these fires from sparking? Brenda will tell you next on Firestorm 2022.
Here in the High Plains, wildfires are a pretty common occurrence, especially during our drier seasons with a La Niña winter and spring. The overall pattern typically brings us favorable conditions for fire weather. This includes low relative humidity values, warm temperatures, and strong winds. Dry vegetation also significantly aids in fire concerns as it adds more fuel for fires to work with. On occasion, we even encourage fires to start, grow, and spread. In order to prevent yourself from being the cause of a wildfire, you can practice these tips for fire safety. Don't park your vehicle on any dry grasses. The heat from your vehicle and converter can spark a fire quickly due to the hot temperatures. Another big and an important tip is to obey and pay attention to burn bans in your area. Any activities that involve open flames or could cause sparks should be avoided. Strong winds and dry conditions would cause a fire to ignite and spread rapidly. One last tip is to properly discard cigarettes and secure any chains or straps if hauling a trailer or material. These are common starts for wildfires in our area. According to the Texas A&M Forest Service website, statistics show 80% of wildfires occur within 2 miles of a community. If a fire is threatening your home, there are a few things you can do to be prepared in advance. In the fall, be sure to clear your roof and gutters of any material like leaves and twigs. This debris could easily catch embers from nearby fires and be the difference between coming home to a close call or no home at all. You should also clear any shrubs or trees that are overhanging or coming into contact with the home. Have personal belongings together in case of an emergency evacuation. Any important documents should also be ready to grab for a quick getaway. Pre-arranging a plan for temporary housing is also a good idea in case you have to evacuate your home. One last tip is to back your vehicle into the garage or driveway. This will help make the evacuation process quicker if loading important items in the car and makes it easier to leave the premises quicker. Although these tips won't guarantee a fire will be prevented, they are very useful to help protect yourself and your property.
And it's no coincidence, 90% of all wildfires that occur here on the High Plains are caused by us as humans. In this segment, you will get to learn the do's and don'ts about fires, arson, and how much jail time, fines, or both you could end up facing if laws are ignored. Starting a fire in the High Plains has to be done with extreme caution. In some cases, we aren't supposed to start fires at all, especially if your county is under a burn ban notice. A majority of the panhandles have been under a burn ban most of the winter, and there's little hope that they will end anytime soon. If you are ever caught burning in a prohibited area, you could face several fines worth several hundreds, if not thousands of dollars.
Within the city of Amarillo, we have what we call prohibited open burning, which is a city ordinance violation. That is a Class C misdemeanor with a fine punishable not to exceed $2,000 for every offense. The counties, both Potter and Roundel, they each set their own burn bans, and they also are Class C misdemeanors for violations, but those fines are only up to $500.
If someone is found liable for intentionally starting a fire, they could be facing up to 20 years in a state prison. And your odds of getting away with that aren't good, according to Fire Marshal Jacob Diaz.
Amarillo Fire Marshal's Office has a very high success rate for cause determination in fires. Sometimes it can be difficult, but we have our team here that's pretty well trained and got a lot of experience.
Diaz says that they often run into instances where people would try and make a fire look like an accident. Stick around. We'll come right back and we'll take a look at fire conditions and how we know to gear up for a dangerous fire season here on Firestorm 2022.
The High Plains are unfortunately no stranger to destructive grassland fires. However, some years are worse than others. Let's take a look at what weather and ground conditions contribute to a dangerous fire season. A part of living on the High Plains means having a great appreciation for the land, water, and weather. The unique environment of the region means large grassland fires are a major concern during the spring season. There are several warning signs meteorologists look for going into a fire season. Michael Gittinger from the National Weather Service tells us more.
You've got all this grass fuel, it dries out, we get very little rain, and so then we've got dry fuel, and La Nina also tends to lead to these very strong systems that go just far enough north that we don't get any rainfall out of them, but they drag in these really dry and windy conditions. So it's all about growing the fuel and then having those really dry and windy days to cause wildfires.
When meteorologists and fire managers look at weather conditions, there are 4 things that create a high fire danger. Temperatures above 70 degrees, relative humidity less than 20%, strong winds over 30 miles per hour, and drought conditions. While these do not start fires, they all allow fires to grow rapidly. Drought conditions are the biggest indicator for an active fire season. As the drought worsens, grasses like this become extremely dry and brittle. This is fuel for fires to burn across the land, making a field like this ablaze within just minutes. Juan Rodriguez from the Texas A&M Forest Service tells us more.
We're coming out of the winter season where we have a lot of freeze-cured and dormant fuels. And with that, so it's a lot easier for these wildfires to kick up and go.
In addition to strong weather conditions, the amount of grass and brush available for burning also plays a key role in creating a dangerous fire season. The amount of grass and brush is what meteorologists and fire crews refer to as the fuel load. The more fuel available to the fire, the hotter it becomes and the faster it spreads across the land. Now, we typically have a good idea of how high that fuel load will be going into a fire season.
The biggest thing that could come together to really create a dangerous fire season for us is a really rainy summer, and then we get into a drought condition following that. Because what happens is that we grow up all this grass fuel, we get what we call a heavy fuel load.
We are no stranger to extreme weather on the high plains. Unfortunately, that includes the danger of wildfires. And as we enter into the month of March, our fire danger will unfortunately become more active as these weather and drought conditions come together more often. But no matter what Mother Nature throws our way this fire season, you can rest easy knowing fire crews, meteorologists, and emergency managers are working together to keep you safe. We've learned a lot today throughout our show about the dangers of wildfires and their impacts on the land, wildlife, and economy. This year has the potential to be an active wildfire season. Here is my season forecast. The Panhandles are home to some extreme weather, and this past year has been no different. However, the recent dry spell has helped develop the right conditions for what could be an active fire season. Michael Gittinger from the National Weather Service has more.
Right now, it's a little concerning. We don't have quite the fuel loading that we've had in some years, although in parts of the Texas Panhandle was quite a bit of rain last summer. But we're in a La Nina condition. We're having these long, stretches of not having any rainfall, and La Nina tends to produce the types of low pressure systems and the tracks that produce bad fire days.
We are entering into the most active time for fires on the high plains. This typically occurs from late February through mid-April, and the impacts of last spring and summer's heavy rainfall combined with long periods of no rain has created prime conditions for an active fire season. Juan Rodriguez from the Texas A&M Forest Service tells us more about that.
We had a really good growing season back in the monsoon season. We had a lot of rain, which was good during that time for fire suppression, but ultimately it caught up to it with the winter season coming in and freeze curing all these fuels. We have a lot more of a heavier fuel loading throughout the high plains.
In addition to having a lot of grass to burn, perhaps the biggest indicator that this year could be a very active season of fires on the high plains is the drought condition. As we take a look at our drought monitor, you can see, again, we have a large area of extreme and even exceptional drought conditions. It's going to take a while for these conditions to improve, and that could have a big impact in terms of how long our fire season will last.
Here in the high plains, we've been in a long-going drought, and it's looking to be that way throughout maybe even the summer. And so with these conditions sustaining, we're looking at a very busy year.
So in addition to a La Nina weather pattern bringing dry and windy conditions, we also have a good amount of grasses on the ground available for burning and an extreme drought that is expected to continue. It's clear that the ingredients are there for an active year of fires on the high plains. No matter what happens this year, the Storm Surge 7 team will be here to keep you prepared for high fire danger. Thanks for joining us for Firestorm 2022. Stay safe and good night.